Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our webinar this afternoon on the low-income housing tax credit and what tenants need to know. Thank you for joining us. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us for this afternoon's webinar. We will give everybody a few more minutes to join the webinar, and then we'll get started. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. It looks like there might be people still joining, so let me give it just maybe 1-2 minutes for people to join before starting the webinar. And just as a reminder, this is a regular webinar format, so we would love to engage with you via the Q&A box and the chat box, but attendees will be automatically muted upon joining. All right, let me get started. And as I do the introductions, a few more people might join. Welcome to today's webinar. As you can see on my screen, the Housing Alliance of Pennsylvania is a statewide coalition working to increase access to safe, decent, and affordable homes for all Pennsylvanians. And we do this work for our vision for home within reach through state and federal policy advocacy, opportunities to connect, share, and learn from your peers, events such as this one, as well as our annual Homes Within Reach conference. If you are not a Housing Alliance member yet, please consider joining. You can visit our website to join as a member at housingalliancepa.org, or you can contact info@housingalliancepa.org for more information on membership. Today's webinar will run approximately an hour, including question and answer. If you would like to ask the presenters a question, please use the Q&A function. The chat function, please use for everything else, including asking us any logistical questions about the webinar. But if you have a specific questions for the panelists, please use the Q&A function, which is on the bottom of your Zoom screen, like in the picture there. The webinar is being recorded, and we will send you a recording of this presentation and any materials the panelists will share with you in approximately a week's time. One more thing that we are doing today that's somewhat new is we have automated captions available. So if you go down to the bottom of your screen and click on the button called Live Transcript, there should be an option to show that automated caption. And before we get started, let you know of some upcoming events. So early next month on September the 8th, the next webinar in our series will look at a special case study on the partnership between Just Mediation Pittsburgh and Allegheny County Housing Authority as they work to resolve resident crises before they lead to eviction filings. Please visit our events page to register for this webinar on win-win partnerships to prevent eviction. Last but not least, the Housing Alliance will be holding our 18th annual Homes Within Reach conference this year in Hershey, PA, again, December 7th to December 9th. The theme for this year's conference will be A Stronger, More Equitable Tomorrow. The conference will be at the Hershey Lodge in Hershey, PA, and we will be opening registration in September. So please be on the lookout for that message. Also wanted to let you know of some recent Housing Alliance resources. So first, we've recently developed a brief on how assistance programs can partner with the courts to stop evictions, including lessons learned from how the Emergency Rental Assistance Program conducted partnership with the courts to make that program much more effective, as well as our housing needs snapshots, which were updated for 2022. Those are available on our website. And to find out more about our policy agenda for this year, please visit our website, housingalliancepa.org/policy agenda. And with that, I would like to introduce our speakers for today's event. Our webinar today is on renting a LIHTC home or low-income housing tax credit home, everything tenants need to know. Our panelists are Kim Dolan, Cindy Daley, and Juanita Edrington-Grant. Kim Dolan is a senior staff attorney at Regional Housing Legal Services. Kim represents nonprofit developers of affordable housing on projects involving a variety of financing, including the federal low-income housing tax credit and other federal, state, and local loan and grant programs. Kim has a subspecialty developing independent living options for people with disabilities. Cindy Daley is the Director of Community Development Initiatives at Regional Housing Legal Services, a position she has held since May 2017. From 1986 to 2004, Cindy was a staff attorney at Regional Housing, representing community organizations engaged in the development of affordable homes. And in the interim, Cindy was the policy director at the Housing Alliance of Pennsylvania. Juanita Edrington-Grant is a community advocate who is committed to being a positive agent of change and reformation. She is the founder and chief executive officer of CRAM, Christian Recovery Aftercare Ministry, a ministry that offers services to ex-offenders, including mentoring, substance abuse support, pre-GED learning, computer and financial literacy classes, family unification, and workforce development. Kim, Cindy, and Juanita will discuss the ins and outs of finding, applying for, and living in a home funded by the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit, which is also called LIHTC, clarifying a process that can be confusing to those accustomed to other programs like public housing or Housing Choice Vouchers. Thank you so much to Kim, Cindy, and Juanita for joining us today and sharing your expertise. The floor is now yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and I am sharing my screen here. I hope everyone can see that. So let's see. We're going to run through the guide here and run through an overview of the LIHTC program. I want to emphasize what the guide is and is not. It is an overview of LIHTC and of renting a LIHTC apartment, living in a LIHTC apartment. It's not an in-depth analysis. We've directed it to tenants. Hopefully it's consumer friendly, also useful for service providers and advocates working with tenants. I did note that there are a few legal services people signed up for this webinar, and National Housing Law Project has an advocate's guide to LIHTC, but this is more general, but hopefully useful. Now, and the guide is available on our website, and when the Housing Alliance sends out the recording of this webinar, we will include a link to where you can download the guide in both English and Spanish. Low-income housing tax credit is a way for developers to raise capital to build affordable housing in exchange for a commitment to keep rents affordable. And we'll talk about what affordable means under this program. LIHTC is not a tax credit for tenants, as some mistakenly thought when we did some focus groups. And so that's why we have really minimized the use of the full name of the program and really just talk about LIHTC throughout. We've arranged the guide in a question and answer format that we hope is easy to follow and useful, easy to read. Now, besides the name, there are many aspects of LIHTC that can be confusing because it is so different from other subsidized housing programs. We're going to talk about income qualifications, rent, and special rules. First, Kim's going to show you how to find a LIHTC apartment. Kim?
Thanks, Cindy. All right, so let me start off by just saying, Juanita and I, the reason that we're on this is that we together developed Hub Veterans Housing. That's a LIHTC development that's in Harrisburg. It opened in 2018, and it's about a mile and a half north of the downtown of Harrisburg. And so that's how Juanita and I got to know each other. Right, Juanita? Right?
Yes.
Yes, yeah. And I dragged her into this because of that. That she's regretting that ever since. But no. When we put that LIHTC development together, we assembled a really expert team of people. To get the thing financed, to get it built, to get it operating, and it's really complicated for anybody. I mean, I had been a practicing attorney for 10 years when I got hired at Regional Housing. I actually was in, for those of you that can see my background, I was actually in that chair being interviewed. And despite the fact that I had been practicing law for so long, it took me a while to get my sea legs about the program. So, and there's many, many places you can go to learn about LIHTC. There's lots of resources on the web. And God bless YouTube. You can watch ad nauseum videos on how the financing is all put together. But there's really not a whole lot from the perspective of a tenant, so that's why we really put this guide together. So to look at, what do tenants need to know, should know about LIHTC. So this page of the guide talks about how you find LIHTC housing. And it's a little bit of an artificial question because, if you're looking for affordable housing, you necessarily don't care how it's financed. You just want to be able to find housing just like anybody else is finding housing. It's in a good location. It's near my work. It's near my kid's school. It's an apartment that it's going to be comfortable for me and my family to live in. It's the right size. It's what's the application process like? How do I get in? What's the waiting list like? And most importantly, can I afford the rent? So that's really what this guide is intended to address. And what are the special rules about LIHTC? So once you actually get into the property. So let me tell you a little bit about how to find a LIHTC property. So there's many ways to do it. The first way is you can, and probably the recommended way, the best place is the PHFA website. So PHFA, that stands for the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency. If you guys are involved in LIHTC at all, you know that agency. That is the place that administers tax credit properties and other programs as well in Pennsylvania. So if you want to find a property, that's a place to go. So can you click on that link for me, Cindy? If you click on that link, it'll take you to PHFA's website that lets you search properties by county.
So, and it is not intuitive. This is what you will see when you first click on that link. You have to scroll to the bottom of the page and there's a inventory. And
so let's choose Dauphin County because that's the location of the development that Juanita and I worked on.
All right. So it's going to bring up a PDF. So bear with me while I switch back. Okay, you can see that actually, in fact, I had, okay, and there is Hub. There's Juanita's project.
There we go. So this is a listing of the LIHTC and other PHFA finance properties, but the LIHTC developments in Dauphin County. So if you take a look at Hub Veterans Housing, there it is. That's the one that Juanita and I worked on together. And there you can see it gives the the name of the development and then the developer and the property management and a phone number for the property manager. And it shows that it's LIHTC. It's the LIHTC box is checked. So that's one way you can tell that it's LIHTC. And that the LIHTC rules will apply. So one caveat is that, LIHTC, as you see here, LIHTC properties might have other funding in it. So there may be other rules that also apply. For example, home funding is often used in conjunction with LIHTC, not always, and there may be separate rules for home funding. So just keep in mind that, these LIHTC rules, it really depends on what the financing is for the development, but we're only going to really address the LIHTC rules. So of course, nothing is easy in this world, right? Everything gets more complicated. Every year I do my taxes, I just think, wow, it just gets more complicated. It's not just, so that's one place to look. So another place to look, and if you look at the bottom, even PHFA of the screen, PHFA has a housing search link, another link. That's another way to get affordable rentals in your area. This is that site, and why don't you click on that, Cindy, and then open it up.
And then let's go to Harrisburg. It's taking a minute. And don't get scammed. So actually, I did have this open to Juanita's before. I think it's on the next page.
Yeah, so if you get the guide, the guide that we have that you can download from our website has live links. And we click on those links and scroll down to the bottom of the page to get this picture.
So here we are. I'm going to click on that and you can get some information.
The screen share is still showing the PDF, just so you know.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Let me get back here then. Sorry about that.
Oh, there you go.
Are you seeing that now? Okay.
Yes.
My screen changed.
Yeah, what's the response?
All right, so let me go back a second and show you what you'll first see. Okay, PA housing search.
Yeah,
And
so
I'm
here
gonna put in
it's a little bit more consumer friendly. You can search by city, by location, not just county, or by zip code. So this, and then you can also narrow it to, a certain apartments that you're looking for. If you're looking for a 2-bedroom, for example, you can do that. And then so you'll get a list of properties, and it'll show the date it was built when you actually click through to the link, so that'll give you the sense of the age of the building and tell you whether it has a waiting list and where to apply. So this is a little bit, and this is actually casts a bit of a wider net. It's not just PHFA managed properties or properties with PHFA financing. In my experience, this site is not always as up to date as the previous one, the one directly on PHFA's website. So I wouldn't just rely on this. So that's
this
another
also.
way.
Sorry, this also indicates that it is a tax credit. Tax credit refers to LIHTC.
Right.
All right, let's get back to.
It does have LIHTC. It has LIHTC and many other affordable apartments. So, all right, and another way to find new apartments is developments are being built every day, every year. PHFA awards new tax credits, so you can go to the PHFA website and actually find developments that are in process. In fact, Cindy, can you go back to the first PDF? At the very bottom of that, it tells you in your county what projects are sort of in the pipeline. You go scroll all the way to the bottom.
Yeah. Of the PDF?
Yeah, there it is. Yeah.
Oh,
so
new development.
It shows you new developments. So these ones that have gotten an award but haven't yet either closed on their financing or started construction. So there's not a whole lot of information about these developments, but you can Google them or actually go to the PHFA awards website or ask, to find, who's the developer. Because sometimes, if it's especially if it's a family development, these may fill up fast. So you want to know when they're starting to take applications and to get your name or your client's name on the waiting list. So there's that. And then in our guide, we also say another way to tell if the property is tax credit, you ask the property manager. Usually these are going to be, there's going to be a property management company, or whether it's the developer control or whether it's a third party property management, and they'll be able to tell you if it's LIHTC. They'll know what that means. Or your lease addendum. PHFA requires that all LIHTC developments have a lease addendum. So that identify it as a LIHTC property. So so those are many ways that you can tell if LIHTC rules apply to you. So Juanita, let me ask you, for the hub veterans, did you know, how did you guys advertise? And do you have any general advice about somebody looking for a LIHTC or other kind of affordable apartment in Harrisburg?
Well, here in Harrisburg, Dauphin County, our availability of the apartments is listed under the Harrisburg Housing Authority, because the Harrisburg Housing Authority is the entity that gave us the vouchers. We have 20 apartments. There's 9 fast vouchers, and then there's 11 project-based vouchers. And what the difference is, I call them something like Section 8 vouchers for veterans, because what that does, it allows the veteran to have a discount on their rent. It's subsidized. The veterans that come in the facility with their own vouchers, that voucher would leave when they leave. So in order for a person to qualify, of course, being from Harrisburg, they still call us and, you know, want to know, even though it's publicized that you have to apply through Harrisburg Housing Authority. When people come, a lot of the people are not knowledgeable on how to apply on the computer. So we actually bring them to our computer lab, which is next door to the physical veteran housing, and we help them to go online and apply. Like right now, we have a waiting list of probably about 30. I don't know if we'll ever get through it because nobody leaves. So we didn't have to do a lot of advertising because of this being, you know, Harrisburg is a small area, and people, just 1 or 2 people get by word of mouth, and it takes off.
Right. So, and you know, and you can tell that your development, Hub Veterans, has this waiting list. If you go back to the PHFA website listing, there's a PSH for permanent supportive housing box that's checked. So usually what that means, it's for a special needs population, and either some or all of the units in it are reserved for people with special needs. In your case, veterans, I think. That's so okay. So the next thing is, how do I qualify? Who qualifies to live? So let's talk about that. I think the first question that you need to ask them that is the development open to me on my age, based on my age? Because many, not all, but some percentage of tax credit developments are reserved for seniors, either 62 and over or 55 and over. And so if you're helping someone find housing, or you're looking for it for yourself, you need to make sure that there's not an age restriction. And then the second question, obviously, is the subsidized program, its income. What are the income requirements? And on the income point, there's really 2 things you need to look at. There's a maximum income, of course. It's basically in the law that there's a federal maximum income that's published every year, and it's updated every year, that you can't exceed in order to live in this housing. And for most development, overall, it can't exceed 80% area median income, or AMI. Although most developments, the limit is 60% AMI. And there's, in addition to a maximum income, there's a minimum income. So, you know, you may be helping a client that clearly doesn't meet the maximum income and doesn't come near that, but they have to have some minimum income because the landlord, the developer needs to know that there's a source of income that can pay the rent every month. So that's, you know, that's something you need to be aware of, and you need to ask the property manager question about what the income requirements are for that particular development. And other requirements, you need to have credit. Landlords will run a credit check, and other things. There's a criminal background check. Also, we'll talk about that a little bit later. And I guess I will turn it over then to Cindy now to talk about how rents are set and that kind of stuff.
All right. This is one of the most confusing aspects about LIHTC, and a significant difference from other programs, because the rent is not based on the tenant's income. It is based on a kind of an imaginary tenant at that maximum rent. And as Kim said, the rents are set for different income levels. So when a developer is first applying to PHFA for tax credits, they have to specify how many units will be affordable being 30% of income, but of the maximum income, affordable to people at 50% of median income, area median income, or 60%, or 20%, or 40%, or up to 80%. And again, as Kim said, most tax credit projects are 50 or 60% of area median, but newer ones have that range from 20% AMI to 80%. So let me see, my glasses on here. So the maximum rents, therefore, will vary. And of course, they also vary by the size of the unit. You know, a 4-bedroom costs more than a 1-bedroom. This is a little illustration, and I think these are all the illustrations we give are Philadelphia area, but we'll show you how to find the limits for the rest of the state. So if the apartment has been designated for people at 20% of area median income, then you have to look at the size of the unit, of course, will dictate, and these would be the rents. But the very same apartment, if it was designated 40% of area median, the rents would be much higher because they're affordable to people at that income level. Now, as Kim said, most tenants are not necessarily, I don't want that yet, are not necessarily at that upper limit. Hold on a second while I switch here. I'm going to flip to in our appendix, we have another example of how the rents are set. So again, using Philadelphia numbers, if the 50% area median income for a 3-person household, because if you've ever looked at these HUD charts, they vary by household size, is 43,500 divided by 12 for the monthly times 30% or 0.3 for affordability. This is the amount the household could afford for rent and utilities. And so that becomes the allowed rent, maximum rent for a 2-bedroom apartment. There is also an allowance for utilities. If utilities are included in the rent, then the rent can be this maximum. If utilities are not included, there's a utility allowance, which will vary by the size of the apartment and the type of utility that the tenant's paying for. So in this example, if the utility allowance is $50 a month, that means that what the tenant will pay for the actual rent is $1,037 instead of $87. And let's see, so property managers, let's see, I'll get to that. So yeah, I'm sorry, let me flip back here a minute. So the utility allowance we talked about. And as Kim said, there's a minimum because the tenant has to be able to pay the rent. Property managers will usually use a formula that the income has to be 2.5 times the rent or 3 times the rent. And you know, that sets the floor for how much somebody needs to have. So we have another complicated chart here that illustrates this, hopefully in a relatively clear way. And again, this is for 20% AMI units, the very lowest price. The gross rent is calculated the way I showed you based on, let's see, this would actually be for, based on area median income, 50%, you go through that multiplication of, 30% of that, you come up with the 362. This assumes a utility allowance of $30 and net rent of 332 for the 1-bedroom apartment. Using the 2.5 times rent formula, the minimum income a tenant would need would be 9,960. The maximum under the not the tenant-based calculation, but the calculation we ran through before is 13,540. So so for a one person, there's a lot of leeway here. There's a lot of flexibility. That gap shrinks as you go to a 2-bedroom. You've got the same maximum income for a 1-person household. If it's a 2-person household, it's more. But the minimum goes up because, again, 2.5 times the rent, right? And if it's a 3-bedroom, the rent's going to be higher. So the minimum income required is higher and actually exceeds the maximum income for a 1-person household, which is okay because a 1-person household is not likely to qualify for a 3-bedroom apartment anyway. This is confusing. Hopefully you can sit with this chart a little bit and it'll make some sense to you. And I don't know if Kim, if you have a clearer way of saying all of that, but
thank you, Cindy, for taking this on. I mean, that's the reason I went to law school, is that I didn't have to deal with numbers. Here we are with the tax credit program. So Juanita, when you look at tenants with, I guess some tenants are familiar with Section 8, where they only pay 30% of their income. And then there's this LIHTC, which, calculates it in a different way. What do you tell tenants? Do you find confusion there? Or is that something you don't personally run into at the hub because everybody has a voucher?
Juanita?
Yeah, Juanita,
I'm sorry, I don't, what was the question?
Yeah, do you find tenants are confused about rent because they're used to vouchers where they only pay 30% of the rent, and it turns out under the tax credit programs, a lot of times you're going to be paying more than 30% of your rent. Do tenants have questions about how rent is set or at all?
Well, no, because the way that it's set up, it takes a lot of pressure off of the property managers to have to discuss that with them, because they have the tenants over there are assigned to a veteran. I think it's called like a caseworker. Okay, so all our referrals come from the VA in Lebanon, Pennsylvania. All our referrals come from them, and like the first floor, for instance, are 7 apartments, are specifically for the 7 veterans that have their own vouchers. So, like for instance, when they come with their voucher, they already know right off the top what they're going to pay. The only difference with them is that voucher, if they leave, like we had a tenant that passed away about 2-3 weeks ago, and he was on the first floor, so that meant his voucher is no longer available for our building. If he would have moved out with that voucher, the voucher would have went with him. So but we only have 7 of those in the building of 20 apartments. But they already are very aware of all the ins and outs of their rent and whether utilities are included before they even accept the apartment. Because when we opened in August of 2018, we had like a 12 or 13 people that day. They all were homeless. They came off the street. So, at that point, they weren't really concerned with how much, because they all get an income, they get some type of VA income. Thus far, we haven't had any issues with anyone not being able to pay the rent because of the income that they receive personally. I don't know what all they get. I know they get a lot of different donations that help them with like their everyday living costs.
Right. Okay. And someone raised a question about vouchers and LIHTC, and you're right. LIHTC and vouchers are 2 different programs, but it often happens that, or sometimes happens that they overlap. Like in the case of HUB veterans, it turns out the residents there have vouchers. Either it's tied to the unit for 13 of the apartments, or the 7 of them that get referred off the voucher list from the VA hospital. So then the reason that we brought up the difference is just to show that, you know, HUD Section 8, which, you know, actually seems pretty uncomplicated when compared to LIHTC, is different from LIHTC. So there, and on under LIHTC, you got to distinguish between what can the landlord charge versus what the tenant pays if they have a voucher or not. And if they don't have a voucher, it's the same thing. So that's the reason that we're talking about both.
And if a tenant just has their own voucher, having been on the Housing Authority waiting list for a long time, they have a tenant-based voucher. They are allowed to use it with Section 8. The income rules don't apply. Of course, all of the other qualifications will apply.
All right, so other things that, you know, the tenants, that may be barriers to tenants getting into LIHTC properties, the criminal history, that's can be an issue. If I have a criminal history, can I get into LIHTC housing? I mean, most property managers run a criminal background check. We can tell you that a landlord that rejects all tenants with any kind of criminal history or arrest record, that's most likely a violation of fair housing law, and that's not kosher, and that can't be. That's a problem. So misdemeanors like shoplifting or possession, or all and older crimes, 10 years and older. That's not a basis in and of itself to reject somebody from an application of somebody trying to get into LIHTC house. More serious offenses could be a problem. Felonies, with manufacture on public housing, manufacture of drugs on that, that's a problem. Armed robbery, that kind of stuff, that could be a basis for excluding something. So I just want to tell people that regional housing has a special project on educating LIHTC landlords about their criminal history screening policy and what they can and can't do, and in order to be in compliance with fair housing laws. And Laura Schwartz, she's an attorney in our office. Actually, she was one of the persons that interviewed me at that table in 2005. She has a special project that on this particular issue, because returning citizens is, finding housing, it's important for the stability, and that can be a major obstacle to finding housing. So she has a program within regional housing to educate landlords about that. If you're helping a client with a more serious offense, the alternative might be something like expungement or sealing or pardons, and legal aid can help you with that. There's a clean slate movement, and Pennsylvania recently passed a clean slate law that can help people in that area. So Juanita, let me ask you. I know CRAM is, your bread and butter is working with returning citizens, ex-offenders. How is LIHTC a good option for them, finding a LIHTC apartment or not?
Well, it is. Well, it depends. It is for some, because like right now, out of the 20 apartments already, I think we have about 4 or 5 that are ex-offenders. But they have things like DUI, maybe retail theft, nothing like, severely violent or hardcore crimes. So when they do the application, that's explained to them right away that, that's not a barrier depending on the charge. But I think that from my understanding of our contract, there's a certain percentage of a non-veteran that we can house. Because for instance, the young man that passed away, okay, his voucher goes away. So there's the apartment. I think the apartment's rent for like maybe $750 a month, and say like the smoking detector, sprinkler, and everything that needs to be fixed for safety. That runs. Let me see. They I'm trying to think here. Okay, so for the ones that have the voucher, like the young man that died, when he died, his voucher went away, of course. If he would have had the other voucher, it would have stayed. So now we have to find a non-veteran tenant that qualifies for the subsidized housing. But they will come in paying, like if the rent's if the rent's 900, they will come in paying that 900, but they wouldn't get the veteran preference. So there's a clause in our contract. It's either 20% or 30%, which means 2 or 3 apartments can be used for non-veterans.
Okay.
As long as there's not a veteran on the waiting list, because that's our issue right now is we have about 15 people on the waiting list and nobody moves. You know, they were brand new apartments, and we had 2. That's the second death we had, and then we had 1 young man that we had to evict. It was unfortunate, but we had to evict him because he was doing some things with drugs that was not acceptable. So we gave him a lot of chances when we found that it was really not stopping the behavior. We had to evict him.
Right. Right, and and when you're a landlord, you're a developer creating this housing, that's something you have to look at. You have to evict people, which is not pleasant. All right, so we talked about criminal history, full-time. There's special rules for full-time students. I won't go into that since we're in the interest of time. That will be in the guide. So let me turn it back over to Cindy.
Okay. So very quickly, of course, all LIHTC developments, apartments do have, or buildings do have some accessible units. They sometimes, a tenant who needs those accessibility features is not applying. And so the apartment can be rented to somebody else with the understanding that if somebody who needs the accessibility features does apply, that the first tenant may have to be relocated. Kim, did you want to talk about credit check and domestic violence? And
Sure. I mean, most, if not all, properties will do a credit check on your application. The biggest issue there is that may be a red flag to a developer or a landlord is prior evictions or utility shut-offs. You might have to, if you're helping somebody with that on their background, you might have to go a little bit the extra mile to show that shouldn't be an issue here. For example, they've squared off with the landlord, that kind of thing. And if the debt is something else that's not rent related, you may be able to reason with the landlord that shouldn't be an issue. So that's one thing. And if you're not eligible, property should have an appeal process. You can appeal and ask for the reason that you were rejected and ask for an opportunity to get your application reconsidered. There's also under the Violence Against Women Act, there's specific protections for against eviction for survivors of domestic violence, and there's information in our guide about how to access these resources.
thanks. A couple of other questions. What if the tenant does not have lawful immigration status? There's nothing in the LIHTC rules that prevents somebody without documentation from renting an apartment. But as you saw when we looked at the description of Juanita's development, most LIHTC projects have other funding attached to them. And those other funds, particularly federal funds, may very well have citizenship requirements. If, for example, if there's a voucher, project-based voucher, the tenant has a voucher, the mixed family rule applies. And that is if somebody in the household does not have lawful status, somebody else does, they could still rent, but the amount of subsidy is prorated. So it is complicated. And if there's a wait list, certainly the tenant should put their name on the wait list. The tenant should keep in touch with the property manager and especially notify the property manager if there's a change in address, because they need to be able to receive notices or they'll be purged from the list. If there's a change in income or family size, it's really important to notify the manager, because that may make the tenant eligible for a different unit, a different size unit, or different designation. If their income went up, now they're eligible for a unit at 40% AMI instead of 20, or if their income went down, it works the other way. And that may be a whole different waiting list. So important to keep in touch. As a resident, Kim.
Right. So as a resident, so hey, you made it through the application process, you got your apartment, great. So what to expect now that you're in there? So, all right, so there's going to be a recertification process, as you would expect in any subsidized housing program. There's a recertification process every year. It's not nearly as intensive in a LIHTC only development on recertification as it is when you first enter. Because the tax credit rules have a really specific requirements about those first year tenant files. They're kind of like gold, you need to keep and hold on to those forever, because if to show that the first tenant that occupied the unit was qualified and was not over income. Otherwise you can lose your you as a developer can lose your tax credits, and that's not something that you want to do. So the first year certification is really, really important. So the recertification is maybe not quite as involved, but on recertification, you're going to be asked, income for every person in the household over 18. Have there been any changes to your household size? If somebody moved away, somebody passed away, or somebody was born, so if your household size increased. Did anybody become a full-time student? Because the full-time student rules might kick in, and so you need to be aware of that. And then assets, generally your assets. Have they increased a lot or not? So one of the interesting quirks about the LIHTC rules is that they theoretically allow you to live in an apartment for the rest of your life, even if your income goes above the maximum. It's like, really? Because apparently, if you're above the maximum, that can't be a reason, a good cause reason for a landlord to evict you. So, so even if you say a tenant wins the lottery, if nothing else changes, it's that tenant, their household size doesn't change, they don't move units, they could stay there for the rest of their life. The only thing that would happen is that their rent might go up to like the maximum to a market rate rent or something. But so that's an interesting quirk about the LIHTC program. Let's see. That rule notwithstanding, you still have to make sure that your tenants report changes in household size and members when that happens, and not wait for recertification. So I guess the next thing is to talk about good cause evictions, or you want to talk about someone
Sure.
moves in. So Juanita, did you recently you had an issue with somebody moving in with one of your tenants? Yeah, I think Juanita.
Well, you know what? It's almost 10 to 2. So
All right. Yeah.
What's the struggle? Yeah.
okay. So yeah, let me. Changing apartments actually might be useful to talk about, Kim.
Sure. So can I be made to change apartments? There are certain circumstances where you might be required to change. There are certain LIHTC, PHFA requires that certain LIHTC apartments be accessible, but it also gives landlords the option, if they can't find someone that can use the accessibilities, rather than keeping the unit vacant until they find someone, to fill it with somebody that doesn't need the features, just with the caveat that if there's an applicant that does need the features, they can make the person move. So if you're in an apartment where it's accessible, and you're just in there until the landlord can make you move essentially. So that's an example of a reason to move. And oftentimes these properties, after maybe 15 years, landlords or developers will go in for refinancing and renovate them substantially. So that might be a reason to move. So the important thing about moving is that you won't be required to recertify like back in year one when you first got in the apartment, if it's just a temporary move. And that's important because if you have to recertify because you move to another building or you have to go through the whole recertification process, you might not be eligible if your income is above, over those 15 years got above the maximum. So you got to be really careful. If you're just moved temporarily, you're not going to go through that recertification, and you're going to still be able to use that rule that I can stay I can stay in this property. But no, so that's something to be aware of.
Okay. We did talk a little bit about evictions, and the main thing to keep in mind is that LIHTC has good cause eviction rules. So a tenant cannot be evicted except for a serious and repeated violation of the lease. We can't list every example of good cause or not good cause. Things happen and ultimately a court's going to decide, but it's that serious and repeated violation that's really key. Again, as Kim said, you can't be evicted because your rent goes up, because your income goes up. End of lease term is not a good cause. If you missed one rent payment, but generally pay on time, that's not good cause. Obviously, there are times, Juanita mentioned a tenant who was dealing drugs and was given certain number of opportunities to clean up and didn't and was evicted. So good cause eviction is a real benefit of LIHTC apartments. Do we want to spend any more time on incomes, Kim?
Yeah,
on maximum?
Yeah, I think you did a great job, Cindy, and you showed us essentially it's confusing, right? So that's why you could look at this guide. I mean, I think the takeaway is that chances are, unless you're at the right maximum income, like you're a one-person household at 20% AMI and you make 13,540, unless you are right at that top level, you're going to be paying more than 30% of your income towards rent, essentially, because that's so the program tries to, that's just the way the program works. So most tenants are going to be spending more than 30% of their income towards rent, unless of course they have a voucher. But that's the takeaway, I think.
And I'll mention that this is the link that I'm not going to take the time to pull up right now, where you get the guidelines for the rest of the state, and bring a magnifying glass. We looked at that page. Other resources.
Right. So fair housing is an issue, obviously. Fair, and a LIHTC landlord needs to comply with fair housing law. So if you think you've been discriminated against, there are lots of resources to get help. Housing Equality Center, that's in the eastern part of the state. They have a really great website and a great guide to what constitutes a fair housing violation. So that's something to look at. And we also have legal aid. Our legal aid throughout the state is robust and here these are there's resources with how to connect to those in our guide. Depending on where you live in the state. And then these are other fair housing resources. So as you can see, fair housing there's a lot of stuff about that. You can go on YouTube and endlessly learn about fair housing too. God bless you too.
And some resources for
Right.
survivors of domestic violence, etc. And that is it. And I'm going to switch to, if I can, I'll get rid of this thing here. Sorry, I had our names, which I'll find. Actually, it'll come out in the, I want to stop sharing. It'll come out in the email. You'll have our contact information. And so let's take some questions.
So the first question in our box is about whether all LIHTC funded providers are required to post their available units to pahousingsearch.com.
My understanding of that website is it's voluntary. So, and as Kim said, it is not just LIHTC, and it's not just subsidized, actually. It's broader than that, but I believe it's voluntary. It's up to the owners to post their properties.
But I do believe that the other website, the first one we mentioned, it's a requirement to be posted on that, right? Yeah.
Right, because actually PHFA compiles that information. They're the ones who fund the LIHTC, and so they have all the information.
Thank you. Another question about the basic process for looking for and applying for a LIHTC unit. So is it that you look for the unit, call them, get the application, and wait for the approval, or is there something else to the process?
Yeah, I mean, you have to apply at each property. There's not one general clearinghouse like there might be for public housing, the housing authority. You might, although housing authorities also have site-based waiting lists. So you have to it's basically like you're a consumer looking for an apartment. You got to chase down all the properties and submit applications for each one of the ones that the properties that you're interested in, and so it's a case by case build, usually site development by development process.
Right, these are all individually owned, privately owned, right? Yeah.
Yeah, although there are some housing authorities that do have LIHTC developments because they, but it's mostly privately. Yeah.
We have a question about what you can tell us about being a tenant in a LIHTC property that is reaching the end of its mandatory period of affordability.
Well, that's a very good question. And that's actually a hot topic in the LIHTC area because there are some properties that, that they're at the end of their affordability period. Actually, these days it's increased. So if you're a new development, you have to commit to 40 years of affordability. But for older properties that may have shorter periods or may be coming up on their deadline, there are special rules about not displacing tenants if it goes market rate, for example. If your grandfathered in, and I forget, I think it's maybe 2 or 3 years, they have to keep, they have to give you notice and give you an opportunity to find another apartment, but they can't evict you immediately at the end of that period if the income restrictions go away. I can tell you that PHFA and many people in the field and regional housing and many legal services groups are work to make sure that the affordability is preserved, and that's part of why nonprofits develop housing. Nonprofits aren't in it for the buck; they're in it, for the mission. And there's an incentive under the federal law and under the Pennsylvania plan to encourage developments owned by nonprofits or controlled by nonprofits. So, but yeah, so that's my short answer to a complicated question.
We have somebody who was wondering whether LIHTC buildings have any services available in the buildings for residents.
I mean, for the tenants?
Yeah.
Oh my God, yes, they have there's a fitness room with there's like 3 cycles. It's a nice size. It's like 4 or 5 people can be there at one time working out on the bike or the elliptical machine or the treadmill. And then they have a recreation room that has a pool table, and I think it's a dart game or something like that. Then there's like a table where you can sit and play like checkers or chess. Then the nicest room, which I love, it's like 2 apartments made into one. It's fully furnished. It has 2 big dining sets with like you can see 8 to 10 people each. There's a full kitchen where tenants can because apartments are not that big, so when they invite family members like for a holiday, they can actually go in there and cook and serve, serve their family members or their friends, or they can have like some type of dinner or something where they can cook and have people don't have to crowd in their apartments. So I think that's a really unique part of that building, and they love that fact that they don't have to come out and do that because not everybody's willing to work for extra vendors.
And there's also social services. Don't you provide, Juanita, does CRAM provide social services to
Yes,
tenants?
we actually have, we actually have, our food bank is actually in that building. We set it up in that building, so they get like first preference. We also have a computer literacy class and financial literacy class that we have 5 laptops that came from the budget that we teach them on. And then I have an incentive program where after they do 10 hours of computer instruction, like whether it be learning the computer or writing a resume or whatever, they get the free refurbished desktop computer after they finish 10 hours of the class. And it's easy for them because I'm right next door.
I would just add that Juanita's program provides wonderful services and facilities. Not all LIHTC properties do, and I'm going to guess that a lot of the older ones maybe didn't have so many services attached. It's become more common. Kim, you would know better than I, but you know, some are specifically designed as permanent supportive housing with services. Many are not, and so the level of service may vary.
Thank you. There are a couple of more questions in the box, but I do note that it is 2 p.m. right now. So unfortunately, we aren't able to get to all the questions today, but we will forward any questions to our panelists for after the event. But I want to really thank you, Juanita, Kim, and Cindy for this presentation, and to thank you to all of you attending for being here. And we will, as I said, send out all the materials later this week. Have a great afternoon, everybody.
Thank you for hosting.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.